Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Luke Mardigian, and you are listening to Be Insured, where we talk about business, leadership, and insurance. That way, on your worst day, when you need it the most, you will be insured. We're going to talk about leadership today, and that's a word that has become so blah, right? Like everybody's teaching about leadership. They think they're the best leader. We've all read the books, gone to the trainings, the seminars, and the podcast, but I have a question for you. I don't want to tell you how to lead. I want to ask you a question. Are you controlling or are you leading? There's a big difference between those two things. The reality is most of us are over-informed and under-transformed because our operating system is based upon really old software, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And joining me for this conversation is my awesome co-host,
Eric Gestring, the Mardigian Agency.
Eric, it's so good to be back in the booth with you. It's been a couple months off.
Yeah, it's been a while. Feels good.
All right, so in leadership, I have a sliding scale. You are somewhere between dictator and apathetic. Which one are you, Eric?
Wow, geez, that's tough. I think some would probably brand me as dictator, but I'm very direct, so that's probably why.
And there's a reason for that. Thank you so much for teeing up my first topic of conversation. Most of our leadership principles are rooted in the industrial military complex, which you were a part of, Eric, weren't you?
I was.
Which part of that industrial military complex were you a part of?
United States Navy.
Best Navy in the whole world, right?
World's finest Navy.
World's finest, sorry. Yeah, obviously, I was not in the Navy. But out of that concept, right, you have like Henry Ford, who his idea of leadership was, how hard can we work people before they start making mistakes? Oh, 40 hours. Cool. Everybody's working a 40-hour work week, and I'll pay you double time after that, and if you die, you die. Sorry. And then we had to form unions, and then it's been this evolution from, the World War I, World War II industrial revolution into the baby boomers, and then the baby boomers taught a lot of that leadership style, right? You do what I say, and I'm the one in charge, and everybody listens to me, and there's no other way. And that transitioned to like the Gen Xers who kind of went against that, where they're like, hey, let's all work in groups. We're all friends. We're all equals. Let's all do this together and hold hands. We're on the same team. And it ended up being just nobody being a leader because they didn't want to be like their parents. And now you have the millennials who are like, do we have to meet? I mean, we could text, right? Like we probably could just email. We don't have to actually have a meeting. And leadership has evolved so much, but some of it's still rooted in that industrial military complex. So let's talk about some of our favorite leaders. I was part of the industrial military complex technically as a paramilitary organization, the Lansing Police Department. And I saw this type of leadership structure time and time again. What happens in these is you start out at the bottom, and then who gets promoted?
Typically, the wrong people get promoted.
Yes, and why?
I think the problem is because they go off of what they perceive instead of what's actually happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like putting on a show, some people are show ponies and good at it, and it plays into the politics aspect. But
well, it's all about, right? Like, so I worked for a Fortune 500 insurance company prior to opening an agency, a Farm Bureau, and they have a strict promote from within.
That's another
policy.
thing, yeah.
Okay, so in the industrial military, that's where that comes from. That goes back 120 years, where if you can establish that you have the same beliefs and values as the leadership, then they like you and they promote you. Even if you're not the most competent, qualified, even if you're not a good leader, you just exhibit the fact that you share the same values, and so they promote you.
Yep.
And you don't actually have to believe in the same things. You don't actually have to have the same values. You just have to present the idea that you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you end up having leaders in place, and this is where this portion of the generation, but there's still some kind of echoes of that into today's world. That portion of the generation is starting to phase out. And what we're finding is that new leaders in this new world, particularly, it was happening pre-COVID-19, but also post-COVID-19, where leaders are trying to adjust, and they're using old operating system. They're using that software from 1910 and the turn of the century industrial revolution, and then that continued through in the military up until like the last 10 years. And it's still there, but the last 10 years, the military has become much more fluid. It's more dynamic. They've taken on some of the private sector's concepts and principles. So leaders, are you controlling or are you leading? Why did I talk about dictatorship and being somewhere between dictatorship and apathetic? Because all of us fall on that scale. And everything from being a dictator, which is I'm standing on my mountain and I'm telling you what to do every single second. And if you don't do it, off with your head, to apathetic, which is whatever. Whatever happens, happens.
And you want to be not on either end, but in the middle somewhere.
Right. Well, all of us are somewhere on that scale.
Yep.
And both of those ends of the scale are control in one way or the other, right? Either you're a dictator, so you're controlling every single aspect of your organization, or you're somewhere on the other side of apathetic and you're controlling by not doing anything. So you're choosing to control your circumstances by not getting involved or just sitting back and saying, it's the laissez-faire concept, right? Of laissez-faire literally means, I wrote down a note here, hold on. It means let them be. So it's just like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to lead my team. I'm just going to let them be. And, in between dictator and apathy is a number of different types of leader.
I'm curious if you can shine light on what the difference between a controller and a leader is.
Oh, that's really good. So controller is, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you control. All right. So I'll give a couple stories. One, I'm a young cop. I get into my first car chase on my own, and a sergeant pulls me aside into the office and says, "Hey, Luke, I just want to have a big brother talk with you. Let's debrief what happened today. I want to make you better. Help me through that process, and let's go for it." And he ended up writing me up for what I shared with him that day, which wasn't illegal. It was just, like one of those things where I was a young cop and I didn't do it perfect by the book.
And then he just betrayed your trust.
Yes. That's called manipulation. Yeah. Which is a version of control, right? It's, I'm going to go to you and pretend I'm talking to you about this, but my end goal is this, right? Or like where, I've had it where other agents will come to me and ask me how I do something just to go to other people and say how I'm doing something not right, to criticize me, right? They're not actually there to become a leader. They're there to control and manipulate. Another example of control, one of my favorites, is the true dictator, right? The drill sergeant. You walk in, there's a reason why drill sergeants are drill sergeants and they're not CEOs, right? Like their leadership style is.
You mean not generals?
Yeah,
right?
Not generals. There you go. Yeah, there's a reason why. Yeah, that's a good comparison. There's a reason why they're not generals and they're drill sergeants. Their job is to tell people what to do because they don't know what to do, right? If your team doesn't know what to do, that means you are not leading. That's the difference between control and leading. Is if you're controlling, it's because you're not taking the time to invest in your people, find out what matters to them, what they value, what their belief systems are. You're not taking the time to recruit properly, to invest those people.
The biggest thing is the training, like you said. So if you're a leader, you take the time to show them. Yes. So lead from the front is a term that we use in the military, and that would be an example of leading from the front is showing them what is expected. You have to set the example first off. Secondly, you have to show them exactly how this is supposed to be done in your expectations and to keep them alive or the team alive. And
or your business alive.
Yeah, or your business alive. And then moving forward, that you don't have to control. It's fluid, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, right.
People own their position, their job when you do that, in my opinion.
Yes, and so you don't have to come out and say that there's only one option. You can go to your team and say, give me the options, right? Because I'm leading you, I'm not controlling you.
Because you want to empower them too.
Yes. It's all about a culture of empowerment, as opposed to the industrial military complex where it's, the upper echelon, the management knows best. Anyone underneath them is inferior, otherwise they would be them. And so they're going to listen to whatever is said, and there is no other conversation. When you compare that to, one of our statewide sales directors, Matt Taylor, hey, home office is thinking about forcing all of our clients to maybe go paperless because we have that option and a lot of people aren't taking it. We're trying to figure out why. What do you think about that? I don't want to answer for the field force. I want your input. That's leadership, right? Because they're going to make a decision, but he wants to make an informed decision based upon the actual end user, as opposed to just being the upper echelon and saying, this is what you're going to do and this is why you're going to do it and this is what's best for everyone.
Imagine if they did that for PIP reform.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it started out that way. It started out that way, and then it became a mess. Michigan auto insurance is a mess.
So getting back into the drill instructor thing, I think there is a season where people need, the reason why that's important in the process of getting to your job when you're in the military is because they need to break down all the badly built qualities that you have to rebuild you.
Yes. So this is where leading steps into place, right? So leadership, you are tasked with establishing the core values of your business. Your core values establish your belief system, and your belief system is what establishes your identity. And from your identity is how you make decisions.
I hope we get back into that later.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a whole episode on that. Actually, that's next. Little open loop preview for you. Next episode next week is going to be all about that identity as a leader. So what happens is, in the military, they bring these guys in and they have whatever belief system they have from their mom, their grandparents. We all have some version of a borrowed belief system. Very few people have original belief systems that they formed completely on their own, unless there was some type of traumatic event. So you have people who have these other belief systems, and the military's job, the drill instructor's job, is to say, you don't believe anything that I don't tell you to believe. Because in the military, having your own beliefs can be dangerous in battle. If you decide at that moment your belief is, I don't kill other human beings, that could mean everyone around you dies because you changed your beliefs.
Like you would think Hacksaw Ridge would have been.
Right.
But if you haven't seen that movie, the guy actually did not want to carry a weapon into war or into battle, and he didn't, because they ended up winning in court-martial. So interesting.
But up until that point, his command, they kind of made him out to be bad guys. All they were doing is following what they've been taught from the industrial military complex, which is we break down belief systems, we replace them with our belief systems so that they do what we need them to do when we need them to do it. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
There is no nuance to that. It is what it is. And in business, there is nuance. And so rather than breaking people down and breaking their belief systems down, you actually teach and you coach the belief system and the values of your business. And that's the difference. Is I'm not trying to, when I come into the business, my job is not to beat into your brain all the things that we value and are important. My job is to teach you why we value them and why they're important, and give you an option. As my employee, you have the option. Either you can live by our values or you can go work somewhere else. And that's not control. That's what's best for you. Because if you don't believe what we believe,
you're not going to be happy here. You're not going to be empowered. You're not going to do your job.
How many people go into the military and are miserable the whole time? Because they don't believe the same things, but they have to. They're now they're a piece of government property. They're not a free individual while they're at work, so to speak.
So what happens when somebody tries to control their way through a situation as a leader or as management or as an owner of a business?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's kind of like dipping your feet in concrete, letting it dry, and trying to run a marathon.
That sounds ineffective.
Yes, because when you start controlling, what you do is you take away your ability to be nimble, because now there's only one option and it's your option. And what if the circumstances change on the front lines? What if it's your customer service rep who answered the phone and you told them all you ever say is XYZ, and then a client introduces some type of nuance to that situation, and all they know how to do is say XYZ over and over and over again. And then you have ticked off customers because they're like, they weren't helping me. She wasn't even trying to help me.
They weren't listening.
They weren't even listening to me. All they kept saying was XYZ, XYZ, XYZ. And they get on this repeat because they have no other options.
Versus having somebody that's empowered enough to problem solve and work through that with that client.
So if one of our staff came to me and said, hey, how do I deal with this problem? My response would be, you deal with it in whatever way is most effective and efficient. I trust your judgment. You have all the resources available to you to solve whatever problem. If you can't solve it, you know who can. If you don't know who can solve it, you know who can tell you who can solve it. There is no end to your ability to innovate and rapidly move, because the whole concept of any business is solving problems. And so it's about taking that client from their problem to the solution that we offer as quickly as possible and as pain-free as possible. So if I'm controlling that entire process, that distance is going to stay really far. And it's going to take a long time to get them to that problem, to get to the solution. And you're going to end up with really unhappy clients in a business that doesn't last.
Can you think of a time when you caught yourself trying to control versus lead?
Oh, too many to count. How many times have I failed?
Same here.
Gosh, if you're listening, I'm sure that's not you. I'm sure you've never controlled. But to me, it's been part of my growing pains. Now, I'll say this. I've had a lot of controlling leadership in my life throughout the years, my professional life. Mm-hmm. And I've learned from them. So I don't necessarily know everything to do perfect, but I know what not to do. And sometimes that's enough to get you started and start forming some type of identity around your leadership and then leading your team to that end. Well, we hope you found today's show helpful. Don't forget to connect with us over on social media at the Mardigian Agency. That's Mardigian on Facebook and Instagram. And Eric, where can they connect with you?
You can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram at Eric Steven Gessring or Eric Farm Bureau.
At Eric Farm Bureau.
Yep.
Don't at me, bro. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on Be Insured.